Hello, dear participants, professors, and researchers, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to my keynote speech. I'm very glad that the team of the Social Science and Humanities Research Association continues supporting us, professors and students, with excellently organized conferences around the earth. It is an honor to me to be able to present my newest findings on the impact of COVID-19 coronavirus on the South Korean higher education system. The research has not yet been completed. Thus, I kindly ask you to share your suggestions and recommendations with me. Thank you very much for your participation and for your criticism also in advance. To my person, my name is Roland Csizmazia. I graduated at the Vienna University of Economics and Business. I work for Kwangwoon University in Seoul, South Korea, and my research focus is related to creative economy, disruptive technology, and intellectual property mainly. You can also see here my email address and my website to contact me. So I will introduce the topic. First, why I felt motivated to write about the impact of COVID-19 on the higher education in South Korea. But also before that, the higher education institution in South Korea faced crisis. And additionally, the policymakers failed to communicate what they actually mean by online learning and online lecture. Stakeholders will be identified within the system of online lecture or online learning, and I will analyze the impact of COVID-19 on higher education, on the stakeholders themselves. The aspects are as follows: financial, education quality, then psychological, the assessment and evaluation, and the lack of standardization, which is always a problem. Further research recommendations will be mentioned, and I will close my presentation with the conclusion. So, as I mentioned, I was motivated. And why? Well, because each faculty member was affected by the pandemic largely. Current research output focuses on regional and national issues rather than on the impact on higher education, and the countries and universities also face similar challenges worldwide based or due to COVID-19, but with different backgrounds and opportunities. I also had to experience a change of learning performance from semester 1 to semester 2. Interestingly, most of the foreign faculties, whom I personally know, claimed that they had lifted work-related stress during the last 2 semesters, as face-to-face classes were replaced by online teaching. On the other hand, Korean professors seem to be relaxed and less affected by the new teaching method. Even more, they reported about positive feedback on the new teaching way. There is no clear certainty about the reason. Still, also Korean professors claim that their workload increased significantly. They reported as much as twice of preparation time they needed for each class. The Korean higher education faces perhaps the biggest challenge over the decades. The crisis before COVID-19 included the following points: lack of differentiation, slow internationalization, problems, mainly financial problems of universities, and aging issues. As Shin already revealed, Korean post-secondary educational institutions have lacked a clear-cut mission differentiation and orientation. Colleges should focus on the task of their selection. If they want to focus on research, a few faculty members should be assigned to the research fields, rather than expecting from scholars both excellent teaching and excellent research output. The competition for students also continued and resulted in the following. Universities launched vocational training programs, and vocational schools launched college degree programs. Korean universities operate nearly as department stores because new departments can be opened anytime. That means also that there is a high level of redundancy. So there is an increasing financial pressure on universities. The three more challenges are the decline of tuition revenues. Tuition revenues are actually frozen. The government does not allow to increase tuitions significantly. The demographic changes through aging and parallel operations of various departments. Additionally, there is a strict and consequent government support based on standardized evaluation processes, so success-oriented subsidies are available to universities with successful research output. Therefore, internationalization efforts are needed. So, universities seek for faculties from renowned universities worldwide. They also target to acquire top-level students, and they have an issue of geographical isolation and also language barriers. That means they need those kind of students who are able to talk Korean, but also at the same time English. There is an increasing demand for joint researches, cooperations, academic exchange programs to serve also the needs of domestic students. At the same time, the universities try to balance demographic changes, however, currently with a deficit of 60,000 students, which actually do not exist in the system after the change or aging change, as you see here. There is a confusion about online learning in Korea. The Korean government announced the introduction of modern online classes, online lectures as buzzwords. So you see here also the news titles: start of online schooling, online learning goes mainstream, colleges poorly prepared for online lectures. It is to be mentioned that the US government implemented the regulations for distance learning in 1944, so online learning, as such correspondence learning or remote learning, is not the first form of distance learning. The reason was at that time to prepare veterans who returned from the Second World War. Collins and Halverson stated in 2010 that distance education has been around for a long time. So distance learning has not only evolved greatly since the introduction of correspondence learning, students had the chance to work at their own pace, finishing courses according to their work load and life schedule as well. Additionally, these days, governments implemented policies to help to support lifelong learning because job security has changed over the time. Employers need new workforce, or the workforce needs to be taught or actually trained again. What does actually the Korean government mean by using the term online classes or online lectures? In 2018, the government formulated a concept for a remote class online with the condition that 25 minutes should be equal to 1 single credit. Now, each class consists of 3 credits. That means each unit in a week should be covered by 75 minutes of online material. However, what this online material is not described by the government and by the ministry. On the other hand, for the higher education, for the high schools, this has been clearly defined in 2020 by the Moon administration, President Moon administration. As you see here, there are several forms of online lecturing, online learning, but which is exactly mentioned or meant to be part of the online lecture, it's not clear. Korea had already faced challenges before the arrival of COVID-19. Both SERS and MERS supported the transition of society to deal with social distancing. As you see here, one of the stakeholders is this administration with the Ministry of Education, the Ministry of Health and Welfare, and the Korea Center for Disease Control and Prevention Agency that was found after the SERS crisis of 2003. When the SARS crisis occurred in Korea, only 2 to 3 researchers from the National Institute of Health were in charge of infectious disease and quarantine policy. President Moon gave the KCDC the status of vice ministerial agency to enable the agency to skip the strict hierarchy of administration. KCDC monitors the progress of COVID-19 and discloses patient movement data via various sources. It also makes recommendations to President Moon about the implementation and the levels of social distancing and lockdowns. Also, students are included in the system, domestic and international students. Universities, not only teaching, but also administrative staff is highly impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. Infrastructure providers are the winners of this online lectures. They provide, and mainly Zoom and Cisco's WebEx is used in Korea or are used in Korea. They provide virtual classrooms to universities. At the same time, the Korean EVELEC learning management system evolved over the time. As COVID-19 became significant in daily life, the Ministry of Education published guidelines to ease the additional workload on school staff caused by increased disinfection and administrative work, and to minimize confusion surrounding the school reopenings and online lectures. Meanwhile, students felt very unhappy with lectures provided by their universities. The dissatisfaction can be attributed to the following: communication problems among stakeholders, low level of readiness of universities to migrate classes online, high or rather appropriate level of students' expectations, quality for money, unplanned shift to online lecturing, no additional training for teaching staff was required, additional investment were expected from both sides the faculty and students. The realization of the guidelines was a problem. In many universities, regulations were explained to professors, and when professors started to prepare their classes, new regulations were implemented due to the level change of social distancing. Also, additionally, there was an increase of lecture time from 75 minutes to 150 minutes, so doubling it. And this was vocally communicated by the university administration. Indeed, only 75 minutes needed to be prepared, and not 150 minutes. A university president survey was created, and also the result was announced in 동아일보 newspaper for the second semester of 2020. There were two questions about the damage level to universities. I assume that the financial damage was mentioned, and about the biggest difficulties universities needed to face. As you see here, more than 90% of the universities mentioned that they have medium to high level damage during the COVID-19 pandemic. The biggest difficulties were described as well. 70.5% of the presidents mentioned that there was a lack of equipment and content for remote teaching. 43.2% reported that additional expenditures were needed, and 36.4% mentioned that students' dissatisfaction became a difficulty to them. 29.5% stated that insufficient support by the government caused troubles, and 18.2% said that declining international influx may become a big difficulty to them as their financial income is decreasing. Financial impact of COVID-19 was also intensified. Tuition fees were a subject to refund. Students expected a refund, but universities did not provide that. During springtime, universities thus refused, but during the summer, they tried to find a way of partial refund and a way of compensation as well. Also, due to COVID-19, there is an intensified competition for students. Domestic students attempted to postpone their studies, and therefore a few universities sought a 100% tuition exemption in Busan, in the second largest city. For international students now, there is a battle, and most of the universities allow online admission, which they didn't implement earlier. There is a large impact on the education quality. Zahn et al. And Watermeyer revealed that teachers do not necessarily have the appropriate skills so that they could suddenly and easily shift from face-to-face online teaching, and often resulted in learning by doing or imitating face-to-face approach. According to Hodges, the temporary shift to a new teaching method due to crisis circumstances, for example by COVID-19 pandemic, cannot be equivalent to a well-planned and designed online education process, and even less to face-to-face learning. As the Korean people are usually technically well-trained, still technical challenges can pressure senior teachers, and as a result, their psychological health may also be harmed. This vicious cycle ultimately results in an increasing dissatisfaction of students. The university administration assumed that faculty members can simply teach the same way, and students can also study at the same way regardless of social distancing and regardless of the role of self-regulated learning, also called SRL. The disadvantages of online learning. Online courses require more time than on-campus classes. They also require good time management skills, otherwise make easier to procrastinate. They require from the individuum active learning, and also they require one to be responsible for their own pace and path to learn. They can create a sense of isolation, thus they intensify the feeling of loneliness. They allow students to be more independent, but this independence may also harm them. They give you more freedom and even more freedom than a student can handle. This basically I also experienced, and therefore I will change the way of teaching as well. The psychological impact should not be underestimated, even though in Korea there is no hard lockdown. Students with underdeveloped SRL skills will suffer from failure. SRL refers to learning that is guided by metacognition, so thinking about one's thinking, strategic actions, planning, monitoring, and evaluating personal progress against a standard, and motivation to learn. Basically, Korean students in high schools are taught to memorize everything to be able to pass the college scholastic ability test. The training helps to store knowledge in a short time, but it fails to develop cognitive learning skills. Thus, most Korean students may have underdeveloped SRL skills. The nature of e-learning also influences the problem. Quality concerns, lack of motivation to use e-learning, lack of technical support from institutes and instructors, inadequate access to technology, and overall lack of e-learning content and development experience are seen as the major obstacles to efficient e-learning systems. This can cause frustration and also depression as there through lack of social interaction. Anxiety also is an issue due to the fear of economic year loss. The impact of lockdown in India caused the following. 42% of students suffered from stress, depression, and anxiety, and at 12.6% described that the situation is highly influenced by unfavorable space of learning. A study from Audrey's Ozola Gonzalez and with other researchers, focuses on the psychological impact of COVID-19 at the Spanish university that also revealed a moderate to extremely severe scores of anxiety, depression, and stress for students and lower scores for the university staff. The government requests universities to purchase devices for managing attendance, such as fingerprint recognition, SMS authentication, and public key infrastructure authentication system. This because the major portion of evaluation accounts for attendance in South Korean higher education universities. But the universities are not yet fully equipped with these devices. In the area of pandemic, universities must re-examine their curricula, learning outcomes, and assessment methods for the courses and programs run online, as they should be distinguished from those meant for face-to-face teaching methods. In international contests, universities have already suspended semester and final examinations, and instead they implement continuous assessment. Sundaresan, with other researchers, suggested that the accent should be placed on continuous evaluation throughout the semester to ensure the objectivity of assessment and examination to prevent fraudulence and plagiarism. Another suggested way would be the open book online examination. Thus, quizzes, reports, and recorded presentations replaced midterm and final examinations also in Korea. There is a need for modifications of established learning methods to support students in studying and to improve their learning performance. The lack of standardization to provide online classes are not only related to the administration of departments which run now redundant services, but also faculty members have no incentive to prepare standardized examination on subjects with the same content. Also, additionally, it is to be mentioned that the use of a third-party developer-provided software or application cannot be equal to one which is in-house application of a standardized open source software. Universities face already financial problems. Now they also pay money, valuable income, to third-party developers. Limitations of freedom and independence and support of team-based study must be standardized. As I revealed, aggregated data from all stakeholders would help to understand their necessities they demand. Suggestions for strategic and long-term solutions are also needed by policymakers. There are a few further research questions. Which factors could be identified and influenced to decrease the level of stress and pressure on both faculties and students? As a second question I raised, why do actually Korean students ask for a refund of their tuition fees if the quality of education would be the same? Thus, we all know the quality suffered a lot. Shall the government provide incentives to promote a certain level of standardizing assessment? And as the last question I can raise here, could subsidies help to motivate faculty to to participate in creating contents for online learning? And I come to the conclusion. So there were points of crisis before COVID-19. These are the demographic change, the decreasing financial resources, slow process of internationalization, and the constant demand for aid from the government. The impact of COVID-19 is that these points or problems, challenges, are intensified, and other points also could be discovered. The problem of loose interpretation of guidelines and recommendations is apparent instead of a transparent regulation. So regulations need to be transparent and clear-cut. Fragility of internationalization process in higher education is there. Also, Korea has only implemented social distancing. The impact on mental health of both students and faculty should not be underestimated. Incentives are required to support university faculties to create better content and to participate in trainings. Thank you very much for your attention. I hope that you like this topic, and please share with me your opinion.